The following is a presentation of KSL Sports. First and 12. A total roundup of BYU and Utah football and the expanded Big 12 Conference. Brought to you by Macy's Grocery Stores. Your hosts are Mitch Harper and Alex Kirry on KSL News Radio and the KSL Sports Zone.
Good morning, everyone. It's another edition of First and 12. Mitch Harper, Alex Kirry with you. So much to get to in Week 12 of Big 12 football. And BYU, they fall for the first time. Utah, will they continue to fall? We'll unpack all of it here in this edition of the show. Alex, happy to be on board with you once again this week.
Mitch, what's up, man? These late nights continue for you and I, and then we get a 1:30 kickoff for BYU next week, and I would only assume that means Utah's going to be at 8:30. So no rest for the wicked. We're all just working all night long, all for football season, and I won't complain because we're watching sports for a living, Mitch.
It's a good time still, even though BYU have their first loss, but we got to dive into that a lot more. Let's start things off with
Absolutely.
BYU falls to the Jayhawks 17-13.
The BYU Breakdown.
All right, that one was a tough one to swallow for BYU fans last night in Provo. The offense had a hard time getting going, even in the first half, and then after the second half, adjustments were made and things were kicked off, and BYU started the half with the football. Their long drive ended with a field goal, and then their next drive ended with an interception in the end zone. That was the difference maker. I know everyone wants to talk about the muffed punt off of the helmet of the BYU player. That is a bad and a tough break. BYU's gotten a lot of good breaks this year, but really it's the mistakes on the things that they had control over. One of them hitting off of a helmet is fine. The interception that Jake Retzlaff threw at the end of the first half to come away from there for BYU with no points, Mitch, I think was the real difference maker, especially considering how low the point totals were for these two teams. Kansas came in. They had a game plan. They wanted to slow it down. BYU felt like they were okay to slow it down with them. And both teams not able to do a ton on offense, and it worked out for Lance Leipold and the Kansas Jayhawks. I think Kalani Sitake on the way into the actual half said that was a stupid play. We shouldn't have made that stupid play. He's talking about the interception, and that mistake really ended up being the difference in this game, Mitch.
That fade needs to fade away from BYU's playbook because 2 straight weeks it results in interceptions. They had the fade against Utah on a 2-point attempt. That needs to go away. And if you are going to run it, have better personnel.
Throw an actual fade? Is that what you were going to say?
Well, throw an actual fade or actually target one of your top wide receivers, not Mata'ava Ta'ase, who is seldomly used in the receiving game. Yes, he's impactful, sure, when he does get targets, but go to Chase Roberts, go to Darius Laster. I thought BYU's tempo in this game, they tried to shrink the game and limit the plays and keep away from Kansas, which I thought was interesting to me because it just felt like BYU was not being their true self where they got tempo, they got energy. They didn't have that in this game, and it almost just felt like they're just trying to shrink the game, try to avoid mistakes. That felt like BYU last year where they were a losing team that had no identity. All of last night, I thought it was noteworthy in that opening third quarter, that drive where they go 17 plays, and it ends up with a field goal. You got to punch that in with a touchdown because in many respects that kind of backfired, eating up that much clock and only getting 3 points.
Yeah, and the defense had Kansas's number. Like, you had them dialed in. The defense does exactly what they're asked to do. Obviously, I mean, if the muff punt thing doesn't happen, fine. You could talk about the points that could have been on the board for BYU, but there's also the points that got on the board for Kansas. I mean, you hold them to a 4th and 15, and they end up getting that weird, who's imagining that Jalen Daniels is gonna just pooch kick that thing? The coaching staff after the game actually said, they're like, we had no idea that was coming our way because we've never seen it on film. I will say I've watched a million football games and I've seen a million little pooch kicks by quarterbacks out there. I was not expecting it at that moment. Brilliant call by Lance Leipold, and obviously it paid off. They probably didn't think to themselves, hey, hit it off the old helmet of the defensive back for BYU. I thought Jacob Robinson, kind of jumping on it and kicking it forward. It's just those were the unfortunate things that really BYU before in the season had those things going their way. But Nevertheless, even with the pick from Mark Collins, nice night from him. And the defense, like I said, what did they hold Kansas to? Less than 250 yards or just over 250 yards on the night. These are the types of games that BYU's had this year where they have, not very many yards, but they win the game. And so you see it flipped on there, and I think obviously now BYU still controls their destiny. It's a tough one, though, because they have to control their destiny going down to Tempe, Arizona next week against Arizona State. Kenny Dillingham and those guys are dialed up, and so you're a little nervous. But I wonder if this might have been a good thing for BYU. Not the loss, obviously, but maybe to just kind of check themselves and to get right after a week where they weren't anticipating to have these things that they run into. So a lot of things on the night that BYU fans are going to be rolling their eyes about and regret that and wish that they could get back. But 9-1. Still tied for first at the top of the Big 12, and obviously you want to be 2 games or a game ahead at least of Colorado, but you can't have a perfect season all the time. We knew how difficult it was going to be to have a perfect season even when they were 9-0. So this is it's a tough one to swallow, but I think Kalani and his guys, they're just going to have to reset and flush this one and get right back to work.
Great work by Jay Hill's defense to show up. They did a nice job because Kansas was dynamite against Iowa State a week ago, had 540 yards, and they only end up with 242, as we noted. But I'm really concerned about this BYU offense heading down the stretch run, Alex, and the concerns about this group coming into the year. Feels like it's showing up now when championships are made, and this is when you want to be operating at a high level, and you've only had 2 touchdowns in the month of November. This is when you need to be looking like a title contender, and they're not. And on that side of the ball, BYU is the pace is slow. They're not executing at a high level, and I just think that Jake Retzlaff, some of the throws he had, some of them were batted down at the line of scrimmage by Kansas defenders or tipped rather. But he didn't seem to have the accuracy that in stretches at times this year he has had.
Arm strength, right?
He's always had like 4 or 5 throws that it's like, oh, that's not good. But it feels like there was a few more on Saturday night. And I just thought, too, that, late in the game, I felt like when they were in that 2-minute drill trying to mount the comeback in the fourth quarter, that's what BYU's offense should look like, where they got a little bit more pace, a little bit more tempo. I think they need to incorporate that more. And I like the idea that they were trying to establish a run game, but, it wasn't, popping off the big plays that you needed. You needed some explosive, some easy plays to really turn the tide in this game. And I think to get that home run ball, if you will, it needed to come from a Darius Lassiter or a Chase Roberts, definitely Chase Roberts, and it just didn't happen for BYU. And but I do agree that with the notion that this could be a good thing. We were talking, you and I, on Friday with Riley Nelson, former BYU quarterback, and I'll admit, leaving LaVell Edwards Stadium, I kind of thought of his comments where the narrative would have been, had they lost next week in Tempe, oh, you can't beat good teams. This loss can be quickly forgotten if you do go into Tempe and get a win, because ASU is probably going to be ranked in the top 25 next week.
Yep.
And if you get that one, you're back on track, and everyone's believing that you can go win the Big 12 again. So you just got to make sure this doesn't turn into 2 losses, because ASU, they're undefeated at home, and we'll talk a lot about them coming up a little bit later. But, BYU's just got to turn this around quick offensively. I'm confident the defense will always travel, but the offense is a real concern heading down the stretch run.
Let's take our first break. Breaking down that BYU game, we're going to come back and listen to the sound this week from Kyle Whittingham, the head coach of the University of Utah. They've dropped now their 6th game in a row. They run into a buzzsaw that is Colorado. Everybody on the planet, well, not everybody, but certainly a lot of people in the television realm want to see Colorado doing phenomenally, and that's what they're doing right now. So we'll take the break. We'll come back. Our program, as always, brought to you by the folks at Macy's. The freshest fruits and vegetables from your local farms and your local favorite brands. Macy's, happy shopping. We'll take the break. We'll come back. Mitch Harper, Alex Kirry. It's KSL News Radio. It's 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone. It's 1st and 12.
Today's just the start of the Big 12 and Power 5 talk to come. Listen to JJ and Alex Monday on your drive home. Afternoons from 3 to 6 on 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
All right, everybody, welcome back. Segment number 2. Happy Sunday it is. 1st and 12, Alex Kirry, Mitch Harper. Thanks for being with us on the program. It's all brought to you by Macy's, of course, every week. Rough week for the Utes. Rough stretch of the last 6 weeks. 6 losses in a row for Kyle Whittingham and company. They go to Colorado, and Coach Prime and that I'm telling you, this thing was set up. I don't know if you noticed this, Mitch, but Big Noon Kickoff from Fox was all there, right? Great, awesome. You get that attention. BYU got that attention earlier this year. But then every commercial break, did you watch this?
Yes.
Every commercial break was pimping Coach Prime's new podcast that you can catch on Fox Sports. I was like, that's convenient for them to be picking this thing, and for Joel Klatt, their former quarterback, of course, be calling the game as well, and the nation's treasure that is Gus Johnson, of course, calling the game. Give the man the Heisman right now, as he said about Travis Hunter, who showed out and had a phenomenal game. But the Utes fall 49-24. Isaac Wilson gets the start. Despite the fact that everybody thought he wasn't going to get the start, and he did not look sharp. He had a couple touchdowns, couple glimpses, couple flashes there, but the 3 picks that he had on the day were absolutely really, really bad moments for the Utes, and he's still got to figure his stuff out going forward. Here's what Coach Kyle Whittingham said after the game.
Okay, first thing I'll say is that's a very good football team that we played today. Coach Sanders done a great job of getting that thing put together. I don't think there's any doubt it's the best team we've played this year. Certainly the best group of receivers, best quarterback. Quarterback's terrific. The receivers as a group they got superstar in there obviously, but as a group they're really good. And so credit them for the win. As bad as things were, we still had a chance there in the fourth quarter. We got that turnover and had momentum and in their territory and proceeded to turn the ball over again. We had 4 turnovers. Tough to win. Turning the ball over 4 times. If you want to know what our main deficiencies were, it was that and the inability to run the football. We didn't run the ball anywhere near where we needed to. Disappointing. Defense, we did some good things. Got 3 takeaways. Still lost the turnover margin, -1, but we didn't tackle particularly well enough. And those athletes they got over there are a big reason for that. I don't want to discount their ability and their skill, because it's a great group. They've put together an outstanding group. So as bad as things are, still 2 games away from a bowl bid. I mean, that's something right there that our guys. First of all, they're together. They work hard. There's no lack of preparation Monday through Friday. They're focused. We just can't find a win. That's where we're at. Didn't do ourselves any favors on special teams. Let the punt return for a touchdown. That's 2 weeks in a row we've had a return for a touchdown against us, which is not ideal. And so, we got certainly enough to work on to keep us busy. But again, I'll say it again, credit those guys, their coach, their coaching staff, and they're a really good football team. So questions?
With the running issue, is that offensive line? Is it the running backs on same vision? Like, where are you?
I think just from watching it, we didn't get any knockoff on the offensive line, no push inside. And you got to get push inside to open up some creases. And they played very tough at the line of scrimmage and really couldn't get anything going.
Kyle, this is, from my reckoning, I could be wrong, your first time as a head coach having a 6-game losing streak.
Right now I'm in the twilight zone, so I guess that could be. I don't know. It's the most difficult year of my coaching career, hands down, not even close. I can tell you that. If that makes you feel better, maybe not. I don't know.
In terms of this program and the state that it's in, what do you feel like needs to change when you look at the course of it?
Well, we've got to get, today was the run game. We got to get better overall throwing the football. And really, defensively, if you just look at sheer numbers, prior to this game, number 1 in total defense, number 1 in scoring defense, number 1 in third down defense, and we're doing a lot of good things. Now that's probably going to suffer after this game, but our main issues this year have been on the offensive side of the ball. I mean, there's no secret about that. And we, just got to keep recruiting. That's number 1. Keep recruiting players and try to get things solved. But we're just not potent enough on offense. And again, if you look just statistically, as good as we are in D, we're that far down the ladder on offense in those statistical categories.
Coach, you started off the game really great with the
Yeah.
INT, but then there was that part. But
Yeah.
fourth quarter, what did you see that started to get put together for you and moving the ball, and what was happening that changed the game there?
Isaac got in a little bit of a rhythm there for a minute and was connected on some passes, getting the ball out quicker, going through his read progression quicker. The protection was a little bit better for a period of time, and so I would say that was the reason for that production spurt that we had there. You mentioned we had the interception early, which is great, but we didn't capitalize. Had to settle for a field goal. So that's in fact the first three trips that we got deep in their territory, we had to settle for field goals each time. That's and again, we've talked about that throughout the course of the year, that it's tough to win games if you're settling for field goals.
Does he practice this week?
He practiced about half the week. Yeah, he was. We didn't know if he was going to be able to play up until probably last night. We had an indication that he was turning the corner and going to be able to function. And so, give him credit. He fought, he battled, and he was not feeling like his usual self, but he hung in there.
Where do you feel like Isaac needs to improve to kind of progress?
Well, we need to get the completion percentage up. We need to get the interceptions down. That's a starting point. We're still, right around 50% completion, and too many interceptions.
Do you feel like
Final
he
question.
was, going through his reads a little faster, a little better in that second half?
Yes, yeah, he started to get a little, like I said, a little bit of a rhythm for a little stretch of time there, and just a freshman. He's learning. I mean, he's learning as we go, and he's a guy that does not lack confidence. My guess is he'll come back. He's a resilient kid. He'll come back and get ready for the next one. So, thank you, everybody. Appreciate it.
And that was Kyle Whittingham after Utah falls to Colorado, 49-24. There were moments where it felt like Utah was, hanging around, but Colorado put it on the Utes. 21 points in the fourth quarter, but kind of note, Kyle Whittingham noting that this was the best team they've faced this year. Indirect shot at BYU.
Why not? I mean, listen, and the reality is that's what we saw. Look, Colorado's not mistake-proof. We've seen that every week, Mitch. Like, Shedeur Sanders will make mistakes. He threw that pick the second play of the game or the first play of the game? First play of the game. Lander Barton steps in front of that thing, and I thought, man, Shedeur Sanders, all the lead up to this thing, and then this kid out of Brighton High School who's also going to be in the NFL and someday. Like, I mean, my goodness, I thought maybe that they could turn some things around and maybe slow down Colorado, but Colorado, even though they had multiple moments of not looking very good, Shedeur Sanders with 2 bad turnovers himself, they still end up putting 49 up on the Utes. And, at some point you think that whole program is just getting worn down by the narrative that's off the field, as well as all the injuries that are happening on the field. It's just it's a really rough time for Witt and his guys.
I'm telling you, Alex, it's the best thing, and I know it sounds crazy, but I really think it'll be the best thing for Utah to just go into the offseason. You can't tell me that a bowl game would benefit.
Oh,
this
absolutely
team.
not.
It's just,
absolutely not.
The whole myth of 15 practices, maybe 5 years ago that meant something.
Yeah.
Now it's about getting a head start on the portal.
Well,
I just think this loss, now you're starting to game plan for the offseason, in my opinion, after this loss.
It's a perfect point, and I think to add on to that, Mike Bajakian's not going to be your offensive coordinator, obviously. And so why do you need 15 extra practices with a guy that you're probably just going to end up letting go anyway in the offseason? Or I don't know if they're going to let him go, and I'm not wishing any ill on this guy, but this is not the future for their offense. They already let go their offensive coordinator halfway through the year. The interim is not the answer. They've got to go in a drastic different direction if they're going to have any sort of success. And if you're going to capitalize on the talent that Isaac Wilson has showed he has, I think he's lost so much confidence, Mitch, and it's an unfortunate situation this year. Most of it is not in Utah's control, but it hasn't helped the development of this young man. I can't think that he came back to Salt Lake yesterday and felt good about where he was at. There's some awesome throws. He put the first touchdown on Travis Hunter of the entire season by anybody, and that was a perfect throw, by the way.
Yeah, to Dorian Singer.
It was a phenomenal throw, and Travis Hunter doesn't get caught with his shorts down like that very often. at all this year. And Isaac Wilson was the guy to break that code, and so was Dorian Singer. But, where's that guy without the mistakes? You know what I mean? And so he's got to have some time to develop. And unfortunately, they have 2 regular season games that they have to march through and obviously have, a good attitude about. But I would think that this Utah team could be on the cusp of going 4-8, having 8 losses in a row to end the season.
It's very possible, and you do wonder if this senior class, how motivated they are to try to get to the postseason. It'll be interesting to see what the approach is of this Utah team, but you did see, kind of like BYU, we were talking about them earlier, but a little bit of a rivalry game hangover. It's real. I mean, I think that game last week in Rice-Eccles was so emotional, and I thought both these teams just fell a little bit flat. Utah was better off out of the gates than BYU with that pick from Barton, but they just seemed physically they didn't have it like we've been accustomed to with these teams this season. And Utah still had 4 sacks on Shedeur Sanders, and that defense was doing everything it could to, basically beg the offense do something in that first half. But then they just ultimately folded in that fourth quarter. You can't blame them because, they were doing everything they could for about, 40 minutes, and then they just kind of folded and withered away to Colorado's high-powered attack.
We got tons going on still, so we're going to take the break here. When we come back, we've got our top 12 headlines in the Big 12. It's First and 12. It's KSL News Radio, and we're also found, of course, on 97.5 the KSL Sports Zone. He's Mitch Harper. I'm Alex Kirry. We'll be back. More to go. 97.5 the KSL Sports Zone and KSL News Radio.
The following is a presentation of KSL Sports. First and 12. A total roundup of BYU and Utah football and the expanded Big 12 Conference. Brought to you by Macy's Grocery Stores. Your hosts are Mitch Harper and Alex Kirry on KSL News Radio and the KSL Sports Zone.
Welcome back into First and 12. Mitch Harper, Alex Kirry with you every single Sunday. We hold it down talking Big 12 football here on KSL News Radio and the KSL Sports Zone. If you miss any part of this show, subscribe to our podcast. Just search First and 12 or even Big 12 football. You can see it on podcasts, wherever you get your podcast. And give us a subscribe and 5-star rating. It helps out the show a ton. We've seen huge growth this season, so we appreciate all of you for subscribing to the podcast and giving us a listen. And one of our favorite segments where we wrap around the Big 12 is our Big 12 headlines.
12 headlines.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12.
The dozen storylines that shape this week of Big 12 football. Headline 1.
Well, you can make fun of the Colorado hype train as much as you want, but it is absolutely running full steam on those tracks. Colorado might look like the best Big 12 team right now. They blew out Utah. 340 yards through the air for Shedeur Sanders. He makes mistakes, like I said earlier, Mitch, but, that Colorado team, they had all the hype. Ralphie's running around on the field before the game. Coach Prime and all of his podcast commercials throughout the broadcast. Amazing. So Colorado taking care of business, and they only have 1 loss in Big 12 play. So does BYU. And those 2 are at the top, and let's see if they can figure it out over the next couple of weeks of the regular season.
I remember doing an interview last year. I think it was it was Jake and Ben, and I said on the Zone, and I said I could see Coach Prime and the Buffs going to the playoff in year 2.
And then you got laughed out of the studio.
Look, I'm not trying to. And then I fully jumped off that pick when I saw him go 4-8 last year. But this team, they've got top-end talent that no other roster in this league can compare with. And I think that special talent can really maybe carry them and, dare I say, maybe get them a playoff win potentially. Colorado is a very unique team, but they are right now probably the best in the Big 12. We'll have our Big 12 power rankings a little bit later. In headline number 2, Utah 6 for the first time in the Kyle Whittingham era. He's been coaching, folks, since 2005 as the head man at Utah. It could end a 10-year streak of winning seasons for the Utes as they sit at 4-6.
Yeah, and it just looks like it's headed that direction. And got to get a boost of energy this week. Got to find it somehow. Speaking of a boost of energy, how about that offense for BYU? They got to find something. The defense is playing well, but BYU's perfect season ended last night, of course, at LaVell Edwards Stadium at the hands of Kansas. The Jayhawks 17-13. It was ugly on the offensive side of things. And all that magic that rolled up through the year, we thought maybe that they had a little bit of it left. They got down to the 15 with 2 minutes left, and then only could muster 3 or 4 more yards, and then a back everything up with a false start penalty in your own stadium at your own student end there. Can't do that. And then they couldn't come up with the score, and BYU loses, and they're 9-1 on the season now.
Kansas stays alive for bowl eligibility after the upset win over BYU. They're 4-6. And then during the broadcast on ESPN, Mark Jones and Roddy, I believe it was Roddy White, saying this might be the best 3-6 football team in the country.
That.
And when I hear that, I want to have the playoff committee say that on Tuesday. Well, when they drop BYU about 12 spots behind the 7th place SEC team, I want to hear them say, well, you know what? We actually thought about moving them up because they lost to the best 3-6 football team.
Best 3-6 team in the country. I think you mean the best 4-6 team in the country now.
Yeah, that's right. But Kansas, their final 2 games, Colorado and Baylor. Going to be tough, but they're still in the bowl hunt.
Cincinnati and Iowa State fired up. We were wondering if the Cyclones were going to just be in this downward spiral for a while. It looked close, but they end up pulling away from Cincinnati. They end that 2-game losing streak. They scored on 3 of their last 5 second-half possessions, and they got it done and ended up doubling up Cincinnati, who continues to be the most forgettable team in the very middle of the conference.
So true. Cincinnati committed a season-high 13 penalties.
Ooh.
They now drop to 5-5 this season. How about Arizona State, though, Alex? A breakthrough victory for Kenny Dillingham and the Sun Devils. They go on the road at K-State. Sam Leavitt passes for 3 touchdowns in a 24-14 win in the Little Apple. Arizona State, are they for real?
Well, BYU fans are hoping not, but I'll tell you they're going to go down to Tempe. And we're going to hear it in our sound roundup coming up in the next segment here. But they're immediately going, you got to get fired up for BYU because they know the path is they've got to beat BYU. They've got to get a little bit of help from other people losing as well. But, yeah, Kenny Dillingham and the Arizona State Sun Devils are absolutely the real deal after beating up on the Wildcats. But it was 24-0 before Kansas State finally scored. So there's obviously that as well. Baylor, speaking of teams that are shocking people, Dave Aranda and his guys. They clinched bowl eligibility. They looked like they were going to be, down in the dumps like the other Oklahoma State of the conference. But Dave Aranda and his guys, they've turned it around, and he might be saving his job. Looks like Dave Aranda might get retained in that job. And I'll tell you, that was a nice one. They win at West Virginia. That's a tough place to win, and they did it. And they put up 49 points in the process. So there you go for the Baylor Bears.
It's wild to think where they were at the end of September when they lost to BYU. And I remember they were down 21-0, and there were members of that Baylor media contingent saying, well, Dave, thanks for the 2021 season, but it's time to bring this to an end.
Wow.
Now he's going to probably be retained, and they are rolling. That's one of the best offenses in college football over the past 6 weeks. Baylor is flying high. Number 10, Garrett Green returns at quarterback for West Virginia, and they fall to Baylor. Should they have just stayed with Nico Martial? Because
I don't know. I mean, Garrett Green still threw for what, like 340 or whatever it was in the game?
He still had 35 points.
Yeah, he had a nice game, but they just couldn't stop anybody on defense, too.
Sure.
I think Garrett Green's your guy going forward, and I know he'd just come back from an injury, but, he still can do some special things, but that defense has got to get shored up here if they're going to do anything at the end of the year. Arizona blows out Houston. We were waiting to see this team all season long. We thought we were going to see them in more games, but they're in the mix for a bowl game. How about Tyler Loop kicking a 62-yard field goal? That guy has a leg. We knew it from the beginning of the season, but my heavens, Arizona, 31-3? That was the final. Houston looked as bad as they looked earlier in the season. We thought they'd maybe turn some things around, but my goodness.
Yeah, it was 27-3 was the final, and we can't figure out Houston, and that's our final headline this week is – who is Houston really? Because they're miscues. They had the interception. They had the fake punt that got stuffed. Houston, they beat K-State. They beat Utah. And then they just get obliterated by an Arizona team that came into the game at 1-5 in Big 12. It really, honestly, it should just be chalked up to a classic Big 12 game where everything that happened a couple weeks ago does not apply because every week is truly a new week in this league, how these teams look. It's wild how that's becoming more of the norm in college football. It's kind of NFL-like where you just kind of throw the records out no matter who you're facing, and you could be had in any given week, and that was Houston, who seemed to be trending up, but took a step back as they went down to Tucson and took a big L.
All right, we'll take the break here. We'll come back. We have our Sound Roundup next. Our program is always brought to you by Macy's. Happy shopping, of course, with the freshest fruits and vegetables from your local farms and your local favorite brands. Macy's, appreciate their support on the program on 1st and 12 this year. We'll take that break. We'll come back. Our Big 12 Sound Roundup is next. Stay with us.
Big 12 Sound Roundup.
Check 1, 2.
The best bites, cheap shots, and excuses from Saturday's postgame news conferences.
All right, welcome back. Sorry, I thought I couldn't hear. I thought that
Check
there was
1, 2.
reverb. Thought we were in the studio making a hit over here. Sound Roundup, brought to you by Macy's Grocery Store. Happy shopping. Mitch, Harper, Alex, Kirry. It's 1st and 12. Our Big 12 focus, of course, as we get into some of the best bites from the entire week here. And my goodness, of course, it's hard to ignore Coach Prime and all the attention that he's getting. But they blow the doors off of Utah yesterday, and Coach Prime and his guys are primed to get themselves to not just the offseason, but how about getting to a college football playoff possibility? Certainly the Big 12 championship game looks like something on the horizon. Here's what he said after that win.
We're trying to get down the field and put the ball in the end zone, kicking it or running it or passing it. So we did that successfully quite a bit today, and we can't take none away from these young men because you guys understand the progress, and you understand that we haven't even put it all together yet. Like, we haven't even played our best game. That should be in itself scary. Like, man, when I said we coming, we still coming. We never stop coming. We are coming, and we ain't nearly there yet. God bless y'all. You good?
Oh, who is he asking that to? It made it sound like he was talking to just one guy. It was like his cousin. Sorry about that. God bless you. You good? It's like, my goodness, Coach Prime.
I have to disagree with Coach Prime. They played near perfect against UCF earlier this year. I think they've gotten better, but I don't know if he's like. I kind of disagree.
He's saying that Shedeur made some dumb mistakes. I mean, that's the reality of it, right? Like, he had that bad pick at the beginning. He had that stupid fumble that he didn't feel like diving on the turf to get because he's like, I don't really want to put myself out there. I don't know, but I think he's mostly just being critical of Shedeur. And the fact is that they made mistakes, they had turnovers, and they let Utah get some points off of those turnovers. And so, yeah, fine.
Yeah.
They didn't shut Utah out, but I don't think anybody's tuning in for Colorado just for their defense.
Well, I will say they have gotten better over the course of the season, and they are playing with a lot more confidence and belief because, they are playing some really good football. And I'm curious to see, you know that the Big 12 is cheering for Colorado to win this thing because they just bring so many eyeballs, and you hear that commentary, the we coming, like he's one of the few coaches that has taglines that everyone knows. He's so famous.
Right.
And Coach Prime, he's one of a kind, that's for sure.
Yep.
On the opposite end of the spectrum in the coaching universe in the Big 12 is Dave Aranda. You cannot get two completely different people, but Dave Aranda is on a roll right now, and his Baylor Bears clinched that 6th win, and most likely he secured his job security with Baylor. This was him after the Bears take down West Virginia.
Yeah, it's good. I mean, I wish we wouldn't have given up that touchdown at the very end. I'd probably celebrate the bowl eligibility a little bit more than that, or more than I am right now. I think there's a bunch of things we can do to get better, and we're going to have to get better to get these wins at the end of the season that we're capable of getting.
Dave Aranda, yep, they clinched bowl eligibility. That's good for them. I will say Baylor's been a shock this second half of the season. Good for them. I'm glad they did turn things around. I like Dave Aranda, and I think that Baylor needs to be one of those programs that needs to kind of shine. You got to have somebody in the middle of Texas who's going to play well if you're going to be in this big conference and doing things. And if you're going to have big brands in the conference, you got to have teams like Baylor show up. Kenny Dillingham, he's the head coach of the Arizona State Sun Devils, and they just beat Kansas State in Manhattan. And don't worry, because he had moved straight on to the post-game press conference to not just that game, but also the one that stood in front of him, which is, of course, BYU coming to Tempe next week.
I think we're pretty good.
I think we're pretty good. But you don't know in today's era because of all the transfers. You don't know what the relative standard of good is anymore because everybody has new teams all the time. I think we're good. I think we got something. And this is a special group. I mean, this is a really special group, and it's kind of crazy when you think about this group, and then you think about, like I said, 35 to 44 guys have the ability to return, and that's even more special. But we got a big game this week versus BYU, and if the Valley's not activated now, I don't know what will.
That was the funniest clip of the entire week because I just imagine him. Like, you can't do a press conference and tell the guys to turn the music down for just 1 minute, or maybe do it in a room where we're not having to hear, the music as much as you can actually hear the coach. But Kenny Dillingham is like 29 years old and
34.
I know he's in his 30s, but I will
young.
say he looks young too. But when you see him on the sidelines and he's pumping his guys up, he walks over and individually goes over and hits guys on the helmet and goes, phenomenal job, great job. Like the head coaches that sit there all stiflingly on the sideline and have their arms folded and look straight forward. And, instead he really celebrates these young men, and they're having an awesome year. I'm glad they're partying in the locker room afterward.
Well, and he brings up a great point, too. If Arizona State fans can't get inspired to show up in Tempe for 8-2 Arizona State, 9-1 BYU, 2 top 25 teams clashing in Tempe, when are they ever going to get excited?
Yeah.
So this is going to be a huge stage next week. I can't wait for that game, and I love that BYU and Arizona State has some juice to it because I feel like that's a matchup that could be really, really good in the years to come in the Big 12 Conference, with it being a regional matchup and, those programs having some long time ago history back in the day, but I think it's a really good matchup, and I can't wait for that one next week. But huge win for Dillingham. I mean, to think where he inherited the program, Herm Edwards basically burned the house down,
right,
and he inherited an absolute mess.
Yeah, and ESPN still props him up on Sundays, and he was like,
"It's a joke.
Oh, let's get your analytics going here, Coach. You just cheated your way through not even winning at Arizona State. Tell us more." Kenny Dillingham. I mean, I don't know, of all the teams that have been like massive surprises, Arizona State might be the biggest one, even over Colorado and BYU. Yeah. I mean, to be quite honest, I think we all thought they were going to be the very bottom of this whole thing. So
they were picked 16th, and I think that's what's fun about this league is that it shows you, man, if that's the 16th best team coming in, and look, people are knocking the media now, but it was so hard to pick this league and handicap
why would
it
you?
Because it was just a mixed bag of multiple leagues, like so hard to gauge. But now we're getting some real intel on these teams, and Arizona State, I mean, I don't know if they're a team that could win a playoff game. I don't know if I feel comfortable with something like that, but man, they're pretty dang good, and I think they're far farther along than much farther along than where I envisioned their rebuild would be in year 2 under Dillingham.
Let's take that break, and we'll get to hour number 2. BYU, of course, got their loss. Utah just lost their 6th in a row. Wild times up in Salt Lake City. We're going to break down that game. We'll hear from Kalani Sitake, of course, from BYU next hour as well. So much more to go. Second hour next of First and 12, 97.5 the KSL Sports Zone and KSL News Radio.